Happy St. Patrick's Day, guys! Today we're talking about a Thanksgiving book. Because why not? Time has no meaning, especially on the internet. Gobbler, F Your Thanksgiving, is an extreme horror, splatterpunk novella. It's only about 40 pages long, so novella or long short story. Self-published in November of 2022 by Judith Sonnet. Now, this book, or novella, short story, whatever you want to call it, was recommended to me by Amazon after I read that terrible vampire book with teeth. You can check that out. The review is on my channel. I'm not sure why this book was a recommendation off of that one, because I won't bury the lead here. This book is better written, better characterization, surprisingly, not filled with slurs and stereotypes and problematic bullshit, which could possibly have something to do with the author herself being a queer woman, or could just have to do with her being a better writer in general than our with teeth author, Kevin Kangas. We're not talking about him today. So, like I said, Gobbler is categorized as extreme horror, splatterpunk. There are trigger warnings all over the place. The author herself has written, "Trigger warning, this is an extreme horror story. It is intended to be upsetting. And in addition to being upsetting, it is disgusting in parts. So don't make the mistake I did. Don't read this book immediately before eating, because there's one particular scene with a turkey baster that is really gross. We'll get there in the spoiler section of this review, because I am going to start with a spoiler-free review. So if you want to read this book, it's free as of this recording. It's free on Kindle Unlimited. It's like $1.99 to buy on Kindle. So if you would like to read it, again, all the trigger warnings for extreme, over the top. This is part of what makes this book great, is just how over the top and ridiculous it gets at points. But if you can handle over the top, upsetting, violence against children, because that is in there, then go ahead and read it, because I think you will enjoy it much more than anyone could have ever enjoyed the last review. So the very quick, spoiler-free, nutshell synopsis of this story is there's a serial killer called the Gobbler who, for the last 18 years since his family was horrifically murdered on Thanksgiving, he comes out and murders one household every Thanksgiving who he perceives to not be celebrating Thanksgiving the correct way. So this Thanksgiving, he is visiting lesbian couple Tig and Norma. Norma is a sheriff, and that comes into play later in our spoiler section. Their 8-year-old adopted son Troy, family friends Bill and Lucy and their 5-year-old daughter Holly, and Norma's brother Ralph and his 9-year-old son Patrick. Happy St. Patrick's Day. So they all come to Tig and Norma's house for a vegan Thanksgiving. And essentially then the Gobbler shows up to wreak havoc, and everything after that I feel like we're getting into spoilers, so when I start talking specifics, I'll give you a spoiler warning. You can skip ahead to the conclusion of this video. So we start out kind of in the Gobbler's perspective, and we never know who he is, we never know his name, we only know him as the Gobbler, although according to him, very beginning of the story, he wanted to call himself the Puritan, but the newspapers dubbed him the Gobbler. He didn't like the moniker much. It was tacky and reeked of 80s cheese. But he does realize that serial killers don't get the privilege of choosing their own moniker, and he should be thankful for everything he does have, because that's what Thanksgiving is all about. Being thankful. Then we get some insight into what he thinks terrifying serial killer costume is, and it is ridiculous, and I love it. Gingerly, he donned his mask. It was of his own making, so immediately you know it's going to be terrible. Fashioned from a wicker cornucopia, it looked like a beige triangle that sat over his face with its top point curled to the left. He had affixed a snappable strap beneath its bottom so that he could wear the mask without worrying about it tipping off his head. So this motherfucker's just wearing a cornucopia on his head, and he thinks this looks terrifying. We'll get there. He had also drilled eye holes into the front, but those were the only modifications he had made. So, cornucopia on his head with eye holes strikes terror into the hearts of us all. He looked at his reflection in the mirror and admired its uncanny terror. He looked like the real deal in terms of freaky slasher villains. Citation needed. That was good. He wanted to strike terror into the hearts of the guilty when he approached them. Then we get the rest of his outfit. Okay. I'm sorry, guys. I'm like sleep deprived and highly caffeinated here. Sponsor me, Monster. He was wearing a frilly blouse and a tight pair of pants. Okay. He was wearing... This is like my third monster of the day. I'm so sorry. He was wearing a frilly blouse and a tight pair of pants, which were secured to his cumbersome hips with an oversized silver buckle. It wasn't exactly what the pilgrims wore. No shit. But it was a close enough assimilation. When a victim was running in fright... like, the biggest danger here is that somebody's gonna see him in this outfit and hurt themselves when they fall down laughing. But, okay. When a victim was running in fright, they wouldn't stop to analyze his get-up for inconsistencies. Nothing like that mattered when you were covered in blood and gore. Okay, but that first person, before he's covered in blood and gore, is going to look at him and just start laughing. Like, whether they're hopped up on caffeine or not, they're gonna look at him and just laugh. So he thinks about his family dying 18 years ago on Thanksgiving, and how it was God punishing him for watching football instead of spending time with the family, and they forgot to say grace before eating the meal. And for his stupidity and hubris, the God that so loved the world he sent his only son to die on the cross had taken everything from the Gobbler, because the Gobbler thinks that Thanksgiving is like a super religious holiday, I guess, even though it's not. It's secular. It's not a religious holiday. So he thinks about how the killer of his family was never found, but it almost didn't matter. He already knew who had killed his family. It was God. Maybe Jesus had given the old man a helping hand. God came into the double-wide trailer, broke his wife's face, assaulted her corpse, killed his son, and butchered his daughter with a chainsaw. Before returning to his heaven, God had said, "And let that be a lesson to you." It was. And for the Gobbler, it was a lesson he didn't need to hear twice. So, every Thanksgiving, he donned his outfit and went out to find someone that needed to be taught the reason for the season. Again, he thinks Thanksgiving is super religious. So then we swap over to our main characters, or our other main characters. We do swap in and out of pretty much everyone's perspective, but now we're with Tig and her and Norma's 8-year-old son, Troy. And Tig is thinking about how Norma is the sheriff and brings her work home with her. So Tig has seen the crime scene reports and photographs of crime scenes of the Gobblers. And in that, Tig thinks that the Gobbler had murdered a family of 3 last year, and he, assuming that the Gobbler was a he, had made a human punch bowl out of their young daughter's head. Clearly the Gobbler is taking some inspiration from Richard Chase. Don't look up that true crime case if you ever want to sleep again. It's pretty horrific and not funny at all. I just want to emphasize, real life, baby head as a punch bowl, not funny. In this book, an idiot wearing a pseudo-pilgrim outfit and a cornucopia on his head, hilarious. So once everyone arrives at Tig and Norma's house, the kids are outside playing, the adults are in the house, in the kitchen. Bill and Lucy have brought like a crock pot of turkey chili so that they have a carnivore option, but other than that, they're making tofurkey. So the kids are playing outside. The Gobbler comes up to them from the woods. I guess their house kind of backs up to the woods a little bit. This is how terrifying he is to them. Surrounded by autumnal hues, the man with a cornucopia for a mask looked like some sort of fall-centric spirit. Like the sort of thing that would teach children about the science of falling leaves or the changing of the seasons in a school program. Patrick realized that the term he was looking for was mascot. This fella was a representation of autumn itself. Patrick had to admit, the guy looked fairly clownish with his garish outfit, his weird mask, and his giant silver-buckled belt. Striking terror into the hearts of children. They think he looks like a party clown. Or a fall-centric mascot. I love that this idiot serial killer... Okay. Would he be considered a serial killer or a spree? He's probably more like a spree killer, right? This idiot masked killer thinks that he looks so terrifying. Meanwhile, 9, 8, and 5-year-old children are like, oh, hi, are you a party clown? So thinking that he is a clown that their parents have hired to entertain them for Thanksgiving, the Gobbler is allowed into the house, where he seethes with rage over the non-traditional Thanksgiving that's being put on. Thanksgiving must be served at the table, he seethed internally. Otherwise it may as well be served in a goddamn fucking feeding trough. Are pigs thankful for their slop? Probably. I mean, aren't animals thankful when you feed them? My cats are very thankful when I feed them. The Gobbler is pissed off about the buffet-style setup for this Thanksgiving dinner, and then he's also pissed off about it being fake turkey, which he found out about because he followed Tig's social media accounts from a burner profile she had friended without question. Internet safety, folks. Know who you're friending. And saw that she intended to feed her guests fake turkey. She may as well have spat in God's face, telling him she didn't care for the birds he provided for sustenance. As far as the Gobbler was concerned, you could be vegan all year long, so long as you ate a proper bird on Thanksgiving. I actually find it really refreshing that the Gobbler's motives are just so dogshit stupid. Like, other authors, I feel, might have rooted some of it in homophobia since it's a lesbian couple who've adopted a child together, but there's none of that evident in this story, which, again, may be down to the author being a queer woman herself. And that's about where I have to stop in the actual reading of the book before we get into spoilers, because it really just kicks off from there, with the Gobbler taking the family hostage and trying to teach a lesson to whoever he leaves surviving about the real meaning of Thanksgiving and the reason for the season, which is usually something you hear more at Christmas time. So I've just got a few more little review things to say before I move into spoilers here. Because again, I do recommend this book. It's actually very well written. The author gives the characters actual inner lives and motivations and good characterization, despite it being such a short story. Despite the ridiculous, over-the-top things that start happening, it's written believably and we actually care about the characters, which is more than I can say for the book that this was a recommendation off of. It's also well written at a technical level, like I believe this author probably got A's in English class, although there are a few little grammar issues. It could have used a proofreader or another pass through by an editor, but they're really minor issues. And also it has just one of my little pet peeves, which is when authors weirdly put like quotation marks around everyday phrases. Like, when I said earlier they were bringing the turkey for a carnivore option, like, carnivore option is put in quotes. I suppose it's not necessarily grammatically incorrect, it's just an odd little quirk that some authors have, and it bugs me just because that's my own little quirk, I suppose. So yeah, go ahead and read this one if you want. Do take the trigger warning seriously because there is upsetting stuff that happens, there's gross stuff that happens, there's violence against children, there is a pretty unnecessary sexual assault. Well, I'll get to that in the spoiler section if you stick around for that. If you don't want to stick around for that, I'll put the time code. I'll put it in the chapters too. You can skip over the spoiler section and just go into the wrap up, my conclusions. But when it comes to the violence in this book, I know it is upsetting. It is meant to be upsetting, but it's also so over the top and sort of cartoonish that it's difficult to actually be upset by it. I laughed a lot, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the things I was laughing at were intended to be funny. It's impossible not to laugh at it a little bit, even if it's just laughing in horror. Okay, so now we'll get into some actual spoilers from the book. So the kids bring the Gobbler into the house, and he kills Bill first by swinging an axe into his crotchal region. Bill fell to his knees, his legs tightened around the axe, and dragged it out of the maniac's hands. A bit confused, the Gobbler stood empty-handed, watching as the man he had injured hobbled backward on his knees, clutching at the shaft of wood that protruded like a comical phallus from betwixt his thighs. Tell me that wasn't intended to be funny. Everything that's funny from here on in is funny in a very fucked up, I'm a terrible person for laughing sort of way, but I've accepted this about myself. So the ball chop itself doesn't kill Bill. The Gobbler gets his axe back and smashes it into his head, where it just kind of hits him and bounces off. It doesn't actually bury itself in his head, but it still kills him. Then he has Patrick, as the oldest child at 9 years old, zip tie all of the adults to their chairs. And then we find out what happened to one of the Gobbler's previous victim families. What had happened to them was insane. The killer had pinned them all to opposing walls, pulled their organs out, and tied them together in the middle of the room. They looked like they were connected to an invisible maypole by their bowels. The only person left to tell the tale was their son, who had been blinded and had had the words "I hate my heritage" scratched into his stomach with a knife. The lettering was exact. The Gobbler hadn't wavered as he carved the epitaph into the 10-year-old. This is meant to be funny. You can't convince me otherwise. This is meant to make you laugh and then hate yourself for laughing. And by the way, the reason the yearlings were killed was because they didn't keep the holiday pure. They refused to celebrate because they believed that Thanksgiving is built on genocide. I mean, yes. Yes, it was. So that's the context for the "I hate my heritage" epitaph carved into a 10-year-old. Let's see. Then the Gobbler shoots Norma in the head, and that's honestly kind of shocking to kill off one of the main characters like that, but I suppose people have to die. And some of them are going to be people that you thought were going to make it. So the Gobbler herds the kids into the other room, and when the adults start asking, "What do you want our kids for?" the Gobbler turns into this weird, like, reminiscent of a schoolyard bully, because they ask, "What do you want our children for?" And "That's for me to know, and for you to find out," the Gobbler mocked. So now I guess he's just like every idiot bully you ever encountered on the playground. He's acting like a child himself. So after a while, and I don't know how long because I can't really track the passage of time in this book, we're not given any real time frame for how much time is passing here. I'm gonna make a point about that in a few minutes here. The Gobbler comes back into the room with a turkey baster, and I will warn you right now, if you're eating, stop. If you're planning on eating, don't. If you just ate, pause this and come back. I hope you have a strong stomach, is what I'm saying. I made the mistake of reading this while dinner was cooking, and then I was not hungry after reading this part. The Gobbler comes back into the room with a turkey baster, full of some unknown substance. He force feeds everyone with it, forces them to swallow, and then he asks Tig if she wants to know what it was. And she doesn't, and I don't. But he's gonna tell us anyway, okay? I honestly don't know if I should read this or just put it up on screen here. Fuck it, I'm committed to this now. That was the contents of Bill's tummy. Really? I can't be scared of a serial killer who says tummy. I opened him up and I filled the baster with his stomach acids, his bile, and his bowel juices. I even put the baster up his rectum and sucked up as much of his shit as I could. Then I poured it all in a bowl and mixed it with my own piss. There's some left over. Do you want seconds? I don't want seconds. I didn't want firsts. So that's disgusting, and I'm a terrible person for laughing, and I'm also 100% sure that the author means for you to laugh at that. This book is a masterpiece of disgusting camp. Is splatter camp a genre? Because this is it, I think. Then immediately after that, we hit a little bit of a sour note. There's a sexual assault with the turkey baster on Lucy. That's the one sour note in what was high camp, hilarious, disgusting slasher bullshit, but we'll just skip on past that. I'm not gonna read that to you or describe it in any graphic way, because then we immediately go back to splatter camp. Possibly some more time passes. I don't know. We're not tracking time very well here. So the oven timer goes off, and the gobbler comes back into the room carrying this like giant baking sheet, the largest that Tig had in the kitchen, which I doubt would be big enough for what is on it. Because, okay, I'm probably going to hell for finding this funny, but it is so over the top. Okay, here is the trigger warning for violence against children, but it's so over the top and so fucked up that I don't actually find it upsetting. It's just so unbelievable and ridiculous. And I have logistical questions that I will get to after I tell you what happened here. So the gobbler tells Tig that since she wanted to celebrate Thanksgiving without the bird that God provided her, there will be meat on this table. He sets the sheet down, and steaming on its top was an amalgamation of limbs and burned flesh. Patrick had been sliced open down the middle. His clothes had been removed, and his arms had been sawed off. His legs ended at the knees. His torso was a widened cavity, stretched so far apart that his splintered ribs pointed like white fence posts toward the heavens. In his center, Troy had been shoved in. He had been cut apart so that all that remained was his head, his torso, and the nubs of his shoulders. He had been deboned as best as possible, so that his lower portions could be folded up and crammed into Patrick. Troy's head rested right beneath Patrick's chin. It was blackened with burns. Holly's head was in Troy's guts. A tangled loop of intestines plugged her opened mouth like the apple in a pig roast. They had been cooked individually, then compressed together. The gobbler had used thick strands of... Oh my god, did this book make me illiterate too? The gobbler had used thick strands of twine to secure them in place so that they wouldn't fall apart as he walked them from one room to the next. The actual butchering had taken place outside. The backyard was a mess of discarded limbs, loose bones, spattered blood, and neatly folded clothing. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I proudly present the human turducken, the gobbler proclaimed with a flourish. Okay, so I have questions. Judith, Ms. Sonnet, I have logistical questions here. How big is this baking sheet? I don't own any baking sheets that would fit a 9-year-old child, even if his legs were chopped off. My oven is not big enough to fit a 9-year-old child, even with his legs cut off. How long have these children been cooking? This last Thanksgiving, I cooked a whole turkey for the first time in my life, and this bird was maybe 14-ish pounds, and that bitch took like 4 hours to cook. How long would you have to cook 3 children? Look, all I'm saying is there's no way these children were cooked long enough. That child meat is not safe for consumption, okay? Yes, this is my problem with this book. Just the logistics of the child turducken. Moving on, because this story ends incredibly abruptly. I probably don't need any more caffeine. I'm getting loopy enough as it is, but fuck it. Sponsor me, monster. Remember how I said Norma is the sheriff, and that comes into play later on. So she wasn't able to call her deputies, but they had apparently been keeping in touch with her and got suspicious when she was no longer returning text messages or whatever. So these deputies show up very suddenly and just shoot the Gobbler. And we're in his thoughts as he lays there dying, and he remembered what he had done to his own family. The Gobbler had had such fun breaking them to pieces and playing in the gore they spewed. He recalled the messes and stains they left behind. And worst of all, he remembered thinking, I shouldn't hold on to this memory. If I do, it might make me do something really bad. I might hurt someone else. It's one thing to kill my own family, but another to go after strangers. Irony! Then the last line. As the deputy continued to vomit, and as the 3 survivors continued to scream, God sat high in his heaven. There amid the clouds, the angels and the souls of the dead, he laughed. So, wait. So this motherfucker really was on a mission from God.
We're on a mission from God.
God is a fucking asshole, if this is true. Atheism for the win, guys. Yeah, God has been watching this and truly ordained the Gobbler as his arbiter of keeping Thanksgiving pure. So that's the book. That's the book itself. And then there's a little afterword from the author, and I'm going to read you a little bit of this. Thanksgiving is my least favorite holiday. I always get sick in November, I don't eat meat, and I can never feel comfortable celebrating a holiday built on genocide. Maybe that's just me. It's not just you, Judith. I agree. Now, Thanksgiving horror. That I can sink my teeth into. The autumnal holidays are ripe for the genre, and so it's always been surprising to me that more slashers didn't partake in Turkey Day aesthetics. And then she mentions Blood Rage, which is a really cool movie. I like it a lot. Home Sweet Home and Thanksgiving. I haven't seen Home Sweet Home. I watched the first 5 minutes of Thanksgiving and couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. That movie's terrible. Not in a way I was enjoying. Then she skips down and says, the idea of a brutal murderer invading your sanctuary is a disturbing one. Maybe that's what makes it so Thanksgiving appropriate. I'll let you read between the lines there. It's not as extreme as most of my books, but I think the involvement of children at its center might make it more intense than she names a couple of her other books. That's all entirely up to the mileage of the reader, I presume. Regardless, this was a story that should offend and shock you. If it offended and shocked you, good. Yeah. I'm sorry if you went in expecting something cute and cuddly, but that's not what extreme horror is. If you went in expecting something cute and cuddly, I worry about your reading comprehension. It's called Gobbler, fuck your Thanksgiving. What would somebody be expecting from that? Cute and cuddly? No. Okay, so to sum up, I did enjoy this, which seems like a horrible thing to say about a book where so many horrible things happen. Personally, I didn't find it that extreme. Like, I'm pretty sure I've read and watched more extreme than this, but like she says in her afterword, the presence of children does kind of ramp that up a little bit. Parts of it were very, very funny, probably because of how extreme and over the top it truly is. So if you have that dark sense of humor and you can take the grossness and the over-the-top violence, I'd say definitely give this one a shot. It's, like I said earlier, it's on Kindle Unlimited as of this recording. And if you don't have Kindle Unlimited, it's like $1.99 on Kindle. It's a quick read. It goes by real fast. Like I said, 40 pages long. It's so much better than the last book I reviewed on here, where I just raged for an incomprehensible amount of time. Now, this author does have a ton of other books on Kindle Unlimited. I was looking through her other titles, and she has some that look really interesting, including one to do with clowns in some capacity. I both love and hate clown horror. Let me know if I should review more from this author, and I will do it. And also, if you'd like to tell me just any book or movie to review, you can head over to Patreon. There's a tier on there where you can tell me what to review within reason, and I'll do it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for coming along with me on this Thanksgiving journey in March and my obnoxious St. Patrick's Day shirt with cat, unicorn, leprechaun, cat, unicorn. I love this shirt because of how obnoxious it is. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy all holidays, because time has no meaning on the internet. And like, subscribe, comment, let the YouTube algorithm know that it should show this video to people, despite the human turducken. And I will see you next time.